When the rainy season ends, Ethiopians pray that they live to see another. Malaria, the #1 killer in the country, is about to strike. 3 million people die of the disease every year worldwide, most of them in Africa. Abaya Chaukare health post in Humbo district. A woman lies on the floor. She's suffering from malaria. A drip on the wall releases medicines against pain, fever and chills. Malkamu Koroto, a public health nurse, packs his drugs, fansidar and antibiotics, and drugs to reduce fever and pain. Malkamu is the only medical health worker for 10,000 people. He covers villages as far away as 20 kilometres. The road is rough, and the government employee often lacks money to buy fuel. He depends on donations from farmers who receive his services. In the Basare resettlement site, houses are filled with patients. A mother with baby in one house. In another hut, a sick woman with her son. Some houses are deserted. Mosquito nets riddled with gaping holes give no protection. Malkamu is guided from house to house. The villagers are eager to receive his help and medicines. Checking for high body temperature only with the hand, and a shot against fever and pain.
We can get many patients. In every house there is 1 or 2 patients. They are suffering from malaria.
Fansidar tablets are the cheapest and only anti-malarial available to the community nurse. In the next hut lie 2 boys who suffer from recurring attacks of malaria. Their pancreas is swollen, their eyes yellow, and they're anemic, all common symptoms of malaria. To diagnose his clients, Malkamu has lots of problems.
There is no laboratory instruments to analyze what kind of malaria that the patients are suffering from. To measure the temperature of the patients, I have no thermometer. Whether the patient is complicated or not, there is no urine analysis in our area.
Fansidar also for the boys, and dirty water from the nearest mosquito pond. More and more often, the drug does not work. Resistance to anti-malaria medicines is a growing problem all over Africa. Addis Ababa, the capital, 2,400 metres above sea level. The malaria mosquito can't survive in this cold, but in the lowlands, epidemics ravage Ethiopia every 5 years. In 2003, an epidemic killed more than 100,000 people. Now the UN has launched the biggest ever anti-malaria campaign. Rory Neft from UNICEF is an expert on malaria. The UN helps fight the disease by distributing mosquito nets, new drugs and malaria test kits, paid for largely by the Global Fund. A Millennium Development Goal is to halt and reverse this disease by 2015.
Ethiopia is unique in that it has epidemic malaria, because large parts of the country are at a high altitude, which doesn't favour transmission for long periods. You have people not exposed to the parasite for long periods, so they lose their immunity to the parasite. And so when they do get infected, they get a very severe attack, and the parasite spreads very quickly through the population. There are at least 10 million cases of malaria each year here, resulting in tens of thousands, and in some years when there's epidemics, hundreds of thousands of deaths.
The mid and lowlands lakes and ponds are a perfect breeding ground for the Anopheles mosquito, which transmits malaria with its bite. Water is all it needs to start an epidemic. Buditi Health Centre in the Ethiopian Midlands experiences localised malaria epidemics every season. Patients arrive here by the hundreds. Most of them carry the deadliest type of malaria, Plasmodium falciparum. It can kill within 3 days. 40% suffer from malaria vivax, a strain that's not deadly but remains dormant in the body. Both can be distinguished under the microscope. She suffers from the deadly kind. From September to December, the clinic is overwhelmed with severe cases.
On admission, she was with fever, headache. In addition, she was in deep coma. Now we have started her with plasma quinine, 600 milligram, 3 times a day.
This woman is also malnourished. The infusion needle can hardly enter her veins. Malaria, combined with malnutrition, needs intensive treatment. But lack of medicines is the biggest problem here.
We have shortage of anti-malarial drugs, especially the new drug, Coartem and quinine, PO.
Coartem, or Artemether lumefantrine, an ACT, is the new wonder drug. It quickly wipes the parasite from the body, therefore reducing transmission.
This drug is, when used correctly, almost 100% effective compared to the previous drug, sulfadoxine pyrimethamine, which had an average of 36% failure rate. So the use of Artemether lumefantrine is particularly good at preventing and controlling epidemic malaria.
But ACT is much more expensive than older drugs, and worldwide production can't keep up with increasing demand, leaving many patients to die.
We're in a situation where many countries in Africa have the same problem with the old drug that is failing to cure people with malaria. And as a result, the demand suddenly increased rapidly, especially with additional funding that's become available through Rollback Malaria and the Global Fund. The other issue, of course, is to make sure that the drug is safe. And it also had to be approved as the first-line anti-malarial drug in Ethiopia.
Children and pregnant women are hit hardest by malaria. In the feeding centre of Dhidi Clinic, malnourished infants are tested for the disease with a new rapid test kit distributed by NGOs and UNICEF. Malnourished children are often too weak to show the typical signs of malaria, chills and fever. The disease remains undetected, and the toddlers die untreated. It takes only a few minutes to get the result. This time it's negative. Fura University in southern Ethiopia, training ground for 50 anti-malaria experts in charge of 9 million people at risk of getting sick. A notoriously weak health system, lack of equipment, drugs and skilled health staff are obstacles in a battle that fights not only disease, but poverty.
93% of regional population is depending on agriculture. As malaria season coincides with the major production and harvest season of agriculture, it really affects the production and also harvest, and it really worsens poverty and retards development in our region.
Harvest time comes at the peak of the malaria season, and many farmers are too weak to bring in their crops. In a country where hunger is part of daily life, maize is rotting in the fields. In recent years, the government promoted water harvesting schemes for food production, but the water in the ponds only helps the mosquito. Malaria has a huge cost on the rural economy. His child is sick with the killer disease. Another child on the way to the government clinic of Humbo, a district notorious for malaria epidemics. At the peak of the malaria season, hundreds of patients are carried every week to the rural health centre. 40% of the Ethiopian population has no access even to the most simple health infrastructure. Villagers have to carry sick relatives and neighbours on wooden stretchers, often for many hours, until they can see a health worker. Firo Dawid is one of only 4 nurses in charge of 70,000 people. There's not a single doctor in Humbo district.
She's very anemic and she's severe malaria case. I didn't treat in a health center. I referred to hospital for further investigation and treatment.
This is the clinic's laboratory. The technician has to work with almost nothing, far from unusual in the Ethiopian health system. The refrigerator is empty, the chemicals ran out, and the microscope was stolen months ago. In the storage room, messy piles of medicines donated by NGOs and the international community, but not the pills and vials which are needed to treat the woman suffering from malaria. The storekeeper finds just 4 boxes of the wonder drug Coartem, but they're doses for children only. The sick woman has to travel to the next hospital an hour's drive away. Processions like this take away a lot of time and energy from farmers who can't tend to their fields. Sometimes it takes hours until the public bus arrives.
One of our big problems is that many people from the village often have to bring patients on stretchers to this clinic. These people need food, but often when we get home, there is nothing for us to eat.
Sodo, capital of Wolaita Zone, an extremely densely populated area of southern Ethiopia. It lies at an altitude of 2,100 metres, and malaria is a common problem in its hinterland. Poverty is everywhere. Sodo Hospital serves a population of more than 1 million people with only 6 doctors. There's no money, and it's filthy. Only people with no choice come here. Fighting disease and dirt, the staff battle with little more than brooms and water. Malaria, the #1 killer here too, in complicated cases and combined with other diseases. 10% of the patients don't survive. The biggest challenge, as usual, is a shortage of drugs. Patients get free quinine for 24 hours. After this, they must buy it themselves. For many, that's a death sentence. This 14-year-old was admitted yesterday.
She's now suffering from epistaxis, nasal bleeding, and she's coughing and spitting blood. She has a big spleen, this size, look. And she has also rash all over the body. It's called ecchymosis, bleeding under the skin. For her immediate problem, she needs blood transfusion. But we don't have the facility for that. We don't have collecting bags. So what we do is we transfuse from man to man, live transfusion.
In a population ridden by disease, this can be risky. As the director tells his students, most patients never make it to the hospital anyway. She's close to death, suffering from cerebral malaria and AIDS, more and more a common sight in this hospital. Her husband died a year ago.
She's in comatose state and she's unconscious. She's now on quinine, IV drips. So she's malnourished, she has poor nutrition status. The survival rate is less than 50%.
The only public hospital for 1 million people has no stocks of coartem. But tragic cases like this one could be avoided, say experts.
Well, the main lessons learned was that we need to identify the epidemics early on, when they occur and where they occur, so we can respond to them quickly. And we need to have the tools, the supplies, for example. We have to have the trained people in place to respond effectively to bring the epidemics under control.
Halfway into the epidemic season, experts are on their way. Half an hour's drive from Sodo Hospital, farmers see for the first time bales of free mosquito nets being unloaded. UNICEF and the World Health Organization aim to distribute millions of nets to prevent the outbreak of malaria epidemics. Until now, the government has mainly provided insecticide against the deadly disease. The farmers look on as mosquito exterminators mix one of the most lethal insecticides in the world, DDT, made in Ethiopia by the Ministry of Health. Without mask and gloves, the crew mixes a deadly brew.
We hear that it is very poisonous. We know that there are other alternatives, but DDT is cheaper and very effective. That's why we're using DDT.
DDT was banned in the West decades ago. The entrance of the hut is sprayed first and then the inside. Trading sleep without mosquitoes for noxious fumes. The bed gets a good load of poison from all sides. Mobile treatment for a village where malaria has always been part of daily life. Rapid testing kits and effective medicines only arrive when health officials go out and campaign. They're looking for indications of a malaria epidemic. But even rapid tests take too long when thousands are sick.
Just we collect 50 slides or 50 specimens. From those specimens, more than 35% positive, there is epidemic.
Handing out magic pills is not a solution. Coartem only works when all tablets are consumed, this man is told. The symptoms disappear quickly and many patients stop taking them before they're cured, so the disease reappears. Screening malnourished children. Malnutrition is a widespread problem in Ethiopia's villages. It's often caused by disease due to unsafe drinking water. Children are measured and weighed. Those who are malnourished and stunted receive a dose of vitamin A to boost the immune system against malaria. Then a net demonstration for people who've never seen or heard of mosquito protection. Nets work best when soaked in insecticides that kill mosquitoes. This needs to be done every 6 months, lectures the anti-malaria chief. Long-lasting treated nets are more effective, but demand outstrips supply. To protect 7.5 million families, 17 million nets are needed, 6 times more than currently available. No wonder the peasants wrangle for their share.
The mosquito nets sent from the central government store are very few. There is a serious shortage. From what we get, we cannot even supply 10% of all the needy with 1 net per household of 5.
Research has shown that widespread net use reduces the risk of epidemics, but the problem is that it takes a long time to supply and educate the whole population. This couple still has to learn how to use a net properly so that it gives real protection. Distributing nets is just one of several solutions. In some areas, NGOs drained mosquito breeding grounds, but farmers are afraid their cattle could run out of water. Draining swamps can reduce malaria in the long run, though.
Before we were in trouble and people died of malaria, but after we made this drainage, things have improved.
Evening in the swamps of Ethiopia, the time of day when the Anopheles mosquito silently bites into human skin to suck the blood that helps it multiply. When night falls, more than 20 million people are at risk of infection in this country alone. Africa-wide, there are hundreds of millions at risk. In order to control malaria, a combination of treatment, protection and prevention is needed, as well as funds and political will. A thin screen helps save lives. Another song and another prayer. At least in this hut, the killer number 1 has no chance of grabbing another soul tonight.